Hello everyone, I hope you're all doing okay. Today I'm bringing you my December reading journal update as well as my 2025 reading wrap up. This video is going to be longer than the last one because I have more spreads and there's the wrap up at the end. I won't have any updating of challenges and stuff at the end of the video because I did all of that in the previous video and I had nothing more to add. The first spread I'm doing is for Every Day I Read by Huang Bo Rom. I'm sorry, I don't know how to pronounce it. I couldn't find a pronunciation guide for the name of this Korean author, so I did my best. Every Day I Read is a collection of essays that the author wrote to help people get back into reading or read more, and she talks about a lot of things in there. Read shorter books, read longer books, what kind of genre of books she likes, what she thinks about book clubs, etc. When I picked it up, I was a bit apprehensive because I thought that it would be a bit, not simple, but a bit matter of fact for me because I've been reading forever it seems, and a lot of the tips she's giving, it's stuff I already implement and I've been implementing for years, but still I was curious about how a Korean author would talk about the cultural life of a country, and it was very interesting from that point of view, but at the same time she had a very earnest and sometimes moving way of presenting stuff. You could see that she really wanted to help people get into reading and understand how comforting and interesting and mind-opening reading could be for people, but at the same time it seemed a bit simplistic, and I tried not to hold it against her because she was so earnest. But if you've read about reading before and if it's a subject you know a lot about, maybe that book won't be too interesting to you. And she also did these passages about e-reading that I didn't find very pertinent. She just cited some studies that says that you read less in depth when you're reading on the screen, and that reading an e-book is not like reading a book and blah blah blah. And it was so ableist because some people don't have a choice to read on an e-reader, to read Braille, to listen to an audiobook. The shortcuts she was making between reading on your phone and reading an e-book were just not interesting and not relevant, so I was quite annoyed by that. But at the same time, there was a very interesting aspect to this work, is that she was talking about her own habits of reading, the essays that moves her, and the way she developed her taste in reading, and that was much more interesting to me than the advices she was giving. And I found very interesting that at some point she talks about taking a non-fiction writing class, and basically she was applying the advices she got from that class for her book. But she could have really forgone the whole advice thing and just give us a reading memoir, and that would have seemed less forced and mechanical in a way. I've also read some reviews that said they found her a bit like she was looking down her nose at readers because she was only talking about reading essays and classics and literature, but I didn't find it this way because she doesn't comment on not finding thrillers or romances or crime stories or fantasy not worth her time. It's just not the type of things she read. And I found it really interesting that she was mostly non-fiction and essay reader because that's not who I am. And it was quite fascinating to see how she was so fascinated by the thoughts of others, and it was not just focused on Korean or Asian writers. She was quoting a lot of French writers and English and from the USA, and I really liked it. For the spread, I really wanted to have some pictures from Korea, and obviously I needed to have a picture of a bookshop. So I typed Korean bookshop and I hope that's what I got, but I saw a storefront, I saw books, and I saw Korean writing, so I decided it was a bookshop. I also printed another picture with some cherry blossom, and that was perfect to go with my cherry blossom stickers and some Marigona Sully stickers with books on it, because I could not have a spread about reading without having any books. And it's a very simple spread, but I really like it. The pictures are really beautiful, and it's one of the things I really love about reading books from other countries is to do the research after that and to discover stuff and to see how things can look like. And case in point, for the next spread, I'm doing Rolling Blackouts, which is a graphic novel by Sarah Glyden. She went to Turkey, Iran, and Syria. And for this spread, I printed pictures from Kurdistan, that's the mountain picture, and from Damascus, Syria. I also had printed a picture for Turkey, but it did not fit on my spread. Rolling Blackouts is a graphic novel that Sarah Glyden wrote after she had followed a group of journalists going to Syria, Turkey, and Iran, and they were trying to report on things that usual media in the US would not report on. And what Glyden wanted to do was report on the way the journalists were reporting. She asked herself the question, what is journalism? And there was a man in this group that was a former US soldier and that was accompanying the journalist, and they were writing a story about him coming back to the countries where he served and how he confronted himself with the reality of what the US military presence meant on the territories he had been in. It was an interesting graphic novel, but it was also a weird experience because the main journalist that Glyden focuses her graphic novel on has a very precise idea of what she wants to write about, and she's already made up her mind about what the former soldier should say about his service, and she gets mad when he doesn't bear his heart to her and explain how sorry he is, how he now recognizes the imperialism of the US, and how the different offensives and wars in the Middle East were motivated by greed and not in any heroic way. She wanted him to admit to the way the different wars and the way the US interfered with different governments and how it destabilized the countries and created the very situations they then went to help with their soldiers. But the soldier was not accepting that. He wasn't saying what she wanted, and she would go into this kind of tantrums about not him accepting stuff. And for a group of journalists that was touting themselves as being different and as really reporting what people said, having no agenda, this was really puzzling and a bit annoying as well. It was also interesting to see how the journalist wanted to frame the story and how they had to have a frame to be able to sell the stories to magazines and newspapers. But the drawings were interesting and I learned a few things, but it felt a bit like an unbalanced graphic novel because Glyden considers that the most important bit of her reporting is after the soldier has left. So she can only focus on the journalists and what journalism is, but that's like not even a fourth of the graphic novel. She spends so much time explaining how stuff are in Turkey, but as soon as they are in Syria, it gets super rushed and some stuff are summarized quickly, and it was a bit of a mixed bag really in the end. For the spread, I've talked about the pictures. I also wanted to have flowers because I love the beautiful landscapes you can see in Syria, Turkey and Iran. I wanted a handwritten title to go with the cover that I didn't add with the spread, and I chose a dark maroon color from my Crayola Super Tips, and I did it off camera because it's not super interesting to do and it takes so much time for me to letter and then cut out that I wanted to not have to deal with this with editing. In the end, I was happy that I had borrowed the book and didn't have to buy it because it wasn't my favorite read of the year. The third spread is going to be a one-page spread for 10,000 Stitches by Olivia Atwater. I had read Half a Soul, which is the first volume in this trilogy, last year or the year before, and I really had enjoyed Half a Soul. I had been so disappointed when I learned that in the second volume we wouldn't be following the same characters, and that's the reason why I had not read volume 2 and 3, which I had already bought while I was reading Half a Soul because I was so happy with it. And I ended up starting 10,000 Stitches because I had been updating a spread where I have my TBR and I saw those titles, I got curious, I started reading it and I ended up finishing it. It was the end of the year, I had a few days off with the holidays and it was an okay read, but what really attracted me to Half a Soul was this concept of Half a Soul and the feelings that arose and how the situation was solved, but 10,000 Stitches felt a bit weird to me. Obviously it's a romance and I didn't feel any sparks between the two main characters. I could see them being very good friends, but I couldn't see them as a couple, and it felt forced once the main character flips the switch that makes her realize that she's in love with Lord Blackthorn. And even though I really love the use of fairy and fairy mythology, it felt super rushed at the end, which Half a Soul had also been. I was still happy to see some characters from Half a Soul back, even for a little bit, and it had been pleasant enough that I thought I was going to read the last volume in the trilogy, because I knew that if I didn't read it right away after this one, it might be difficult to get the motivation to do it later, but I didn't end up doing that because I was on my e-reader and I saw other ebooks I had bought a few years back that I got curious in, and I ended up reading one of those and buying 2 more. For the spread, I didn't have enough to save for a full spread, so I did just 1 page, and I love those little 1-page spreads because they're so easy to do, they're so cute. I used a washi tape from Journal Say. I've been using a lot for these half-a-page spread. I added my trusty Marigona Sully stickers because they have this witchy vibe that goes super well with 10,000 Stitches. And that was it. I've been using my label maker a lot to the titles because it's so easy. They immediately add something different to the page, and I really like how simple it is to make. The second 1-page spread I'm doing is for Crudrat by Gail Carriger. Crudrat is originally an audiobook that Carriger wrote an ebook about a few years ago. Carriger is most known for her steampunk Soulless, and I've basically read everything she's written so far, and there was a time where I really loved what she did, but I gotten tired of her and I had bought Crudrat as soon as it came out but never ended up reading it. But this time around I started reading Crudrat and I ended up really liking it as soon as I went past, I would say 2/3 of the book, which seems like a lot, and I really hate it when people say that in reviews, like as soon as you have read 2/3 of the book it gets good, but it's true. I loved the way that the space opera was set. I love the world building, I kind of like the characters as well, and the last third was so interesting. I love the found family aspect, it wasn't too much for me. I'm going to carry a different tune for the next 2 Gail Carriger books I'm going to review in that video, because it's set in the same universe but the found family aspect was just too much for me in those ones. But in this one it was perfect, and I really had wished there had been a sequel to that book, and it really feels that it was set up to have a sequel. So Crudrat is set on this space station that's a whole world for its inhabitants. It's called the Wheel, and when you reach 6 years old you have to have an implant put into you, and if you reject the implant for some reason, you are not a citizen, you are just discarded, and the only jobs that's available to you is begging or being a Crudrat, that is cleaning the air vents that make the station just go round and round. and our main character is such a Quadrat, and she discovers an alien that's boarded the ship, and hijinks ensues. I never really know what to do for space opera reviews because I only see stars and I don't have any star stickers, so I thought that I would just use a Starry Sky from Canva and use it kind of like a washi tape and put it on my spread. As soon as I had printed it, I thought that maybe I could use one of my hole puncher I just had gotten, and that hexagonal shape felt really space opera to me. So I thought I could make a little pattern, and that was my decoration. If I had been thinking about it a bit more, I would have found a Starry Sky with blue tones in it because the cover is blue. But I'm still happy with it, and I'll be reusing the techniques for other spreads. In my previous update, I told you I would be doing another of my picture album spreads, and here it is. And I've also been informed that people might not understand when I say album, when I mean picture books. And I always thought that, like in French, you use the word album to talk about picture books, like little kids' books, but it's apparently not the case for everyone, so I apologize, and I'll try to be more mindful about using the word picture album. About using the word picture book. So the spread is very simple. I have a few covers and I write short reviews on top and under them, and I just think it's super cute. I have a few favorite albums on that spread, but I will not finish it. There will be 2 empty spaces that I will just fill when I read picture books I want to talk about. One of my favorite picture books on this spread was The Pencil. It's about an Inuk family. The mom has this pencil and this little stash of paper that she only uses when she has to write letters to family, and the kids are fascinated by it. And one day when the mom goes out, the dad lets them use the pencil and they start drawing, and it's just a really sweet album about Inuk life and about art, and I really enjoyed it. The other picture books, I really don't want to say picture books, don't I? Were Welcome to the Party, which wasn't awesome in my opinion. The other 2 albums, Auntie's Red Surprise and The Day I Became Number 54, were also great, but I really loved The Day I Became Number 54. I don't have the cover right now, but you'll see it in the flip through at the end of the video. The Day I Became Number 54 is about residential schools and about these siblings that were taken to residential schools, and I've been thinking about it ever since I read it. It was really tough, but also really important to read. I'm doing a spread for Murder in Mesopotamia. It's a book by Agatha Christie, and I listened to the audiobook in French. I've listened to this audiobook, I think 3, 4, 5 times. Usually in the winter, I just want to listen to something set in Egypt or Iraq, and that has to do with archaeology. In the past, I've really loved Agatha Christie, and I think that she works very well for audiobooks because the stories are short and kind of simple, and I love the French narrators we have. I had listened to this one last year when I started doing some snowshoeing, and as you saw at the beginning of the video, we got quite a lot of snow, so I went snowshoeing and I started that book, and with every re-listen of that book I get even more and more. I think it's a nicely wrapped up mystery, but at the same time Christie makes you root for the murderer, and you have this scene where you're supposed to feel sympathy for that guy that's murdered 2 women just because, and I quote, "If I couldn't have her, no one could." And Poirot describes the first victim as this femme fatale, basically, that brought it upon herself, and he describes all these nasty habits she had, except we followed these characters for a few days and we've never seen her acting like this. He never met her while she was alive either, so we're supposed to believe him, and he's Poirot, so he must be right, but it's such a weird and balanced thing to give to us, and yeah, it's just hard to root for a murderer of women just because he was a jealous boy. So just be warned if you want to read or listen to Murder in Mesopotamia. For the spread, I just used some pictures I had printed for my Arabian Nights spread. For my next double spread, which I think is the last spread of the video, I'm doing another space opera spread. I'm going to do 2 books in the spread. It's for the series The Tinkered Stars by Gail Carriger. It's Volume 1, Divinity 36, and Volume 2, Demigod 12. I wanted to use the same technique as I had done with Crudrat, except I didn't want to print any starry skies. I went through some of the magazines I use for collaging, and I saw this full picture of the sea, and I thought maybe it could look like it was the sky or a nebula or something. And what's funny is that a few pages later in the magazine there was an actual night sky, but I didn't see it that day. And I think the colors work well with the first cover, but the second cover is more purple, so it's not out of the question that I will be looking for some more purple paper that I could use for that spread, and I could just glue over it or just remove the little cutouts I've done, because if you've ever tried to collage with magazine paper, it's this weird texture that's either gets stuck to paper and never moves or super hard to glue down, so it might be super easy to lift from the page. Divinity 36 follows a character called Fex, and Fex is 18 or 19, I think, and he lives on a moon and he's a barista and he goes to school and he basically has not a lot in his life. He comes from the same space station as the character from Crudrat, and he's a refugee. Kind of by chance, he ends up at an audition to become a god. In this universe, the Diocese have created this music industry where people basically become K-pop idols that are called gods, and they are worshipped throughout the universe, and they go to an academy to try to form a pantheon and find their fellow gods and create what they call God Song, which is a kind of music that really put people in kind of a trance, and Fex ends up being accepted to be one of those apprentice gods. And it's such an interesting concept, but also hard to grasp because my mind keeps saying, it's just a singer, why is it called a god, why is it godly? And I don't think I've really flipped the switch that I get it. But Gail Carriger certainly has a vivid imagination and she creates those interesting universes. But in Divinity 36 and Demigod 12, she really does the thing that really annoyed me a lot and that made me stop reading her, is that she does so much telling and so little showing. You basically spend pages and pages and pages in the mind of the main character, and you don't actually see things happening, you just see them recounting them, and he ends up falling in love with someone and he keeps thinking about them, and it's just so much rambling. And Divinity 36 was still okay with it, but in Demigod 12 I had so many passages that I just skipped because it was just rambling. It didn't go anywhere, you didn't have any more new information. He was in love, but it was complicated, but that character needed his love and blah blah blah, and it's just, I think I'm gonna read the last volume because I'm really curious about the kind of mystery that's set up. But yeah, I don't know if I would recommend that series. Crudrat, yes. The Tinkered Stars series, I'm not sure. Now, for my cover page, I didn't show you setting up the spread at the beginning of the video because I finished my second reading journal and I had already started preparing that journal for 2026. So originally, the cover page on the left was for 2026 and I had glued a sticker saying 2026 on it. But when I finished the other journal earlier than expected, I had to decide what to do, and I ended up removing the sticker with 2026, doing the same thing I had done at the beginning of my second journal, which is to write 2025, follow up basically suite in French, and using the right for my December cover page. And I struggled with this so long, it was stupid, because I was so happy about the cover page I had set up. I had used those individual washi stickers from Journal Say that are original impressionist paintings from Monet and Van Gogh. I really didn't want to have to move them again because it had taken so much time to place them where I'd wanted. But at the same time, I wanted it to also be my 2026 cover page. So now when I'm recording that voiceover, I haven't made my 2026 cover page, but I think I'm gonna just redo the same because I think it goes well with the new journal I have. The next video I will publish will most likely exactly be my 2026 reading journal setup, and I'm really happy about it. I went with the same brand of journal as my second journal, which is Hemlock and Oak, and it's a Canadian brand, and I was so happy with it. But now I'm setting up my wrap-up, and I basically did the same layout as I did for my 2024 wrap-up because I just loved how it looked. Last year I scanned this end paper, this old end paper from a book that was yellowing and had little spots on it, and I used to print it to make backgrounds for my layout, but I can't find it anymore. So what I did is that I bought this old sketch pad from the thrift shop, and it's old and yellowed, and I use it as a background for my spreads now. I don't have a lot of pages of it, so that's why I don't use it often, but I really like the texture it gives to the page. For my wrap-up, I wanted to have a page with all my favorite reads and also a few statistics. I like to keep track of the countries the writers I'm reading come from, the genres of the book, how many of my reads were graphic novels and picture books and novels and audiobooks, and I also like to know how many female identifying author and male identifying author I read. Of course, there's categories missing from that because these two are not the only gender identities that exist, but that's the info from the authors I read last year. And I used some purple flower stickers from Journalsay, and I think they're super cute. I'm just sad. It feels weird to use them because Journalsay uses a lot of AI, but I bought those stickers before I understood exactly what that meant. And now that I have them, I don't want to waste them, but I'm not going to be repurchasing stuff from Journalsay. In 2025, I read 35 novels and collections of short stories. I also listened to 6 audiobooks. I read 14 graphic novels, 6 mangas and manhwas, and 36 picture albums. I like to have the detail because on Goodreads you have a reading objective, but they count everything as a book read, and for me a picture album or an audiobook or a graphic novel doesn't really count to my reading objective, and my objective had been to read at least 1 book a month because there was a span of a few years where I did not read at least a book a month after having spent years of reading like 10 or 12 a month, and that had been hard for me, so I really was trying to read more than this, and I'm happy that I succeeded. 91% of the authors I read were female identifying and 9% were male identifying, and I really wouldn't have had a lot of male identifying authors if I hadn't read a few collections of short stories where there were male authors. So in the genres of stuff I read, the majority was science fiction and fantasies. There were 26 books in that categories. I read 2 classics, 2 non-fiction essays, and 2 general literature. 80% of the authors I read were from the US. 3% were from the UK. 5.7% were First Nation authors, Korean authors, and Middle Eastern authors. And that's a bit mixed because I had the Arabian Nights and we don't really know where the different authors are from. And I also read books with authors from Syria and Palestine. That's why I just wrote Middle East on the spread. And here it is. I hope you enjoyed the video. I'm quite excited for the next one because I think the journal is super cute and I'm happy with the stuff I've set up. Please tell me in the comments what were your favorite reads from 2025 and if you think I should read them. I'm always curious when I have recommendations in the comments, and I'll see you next time.